essentially essentially grow the babies in a bottle, and they won't need men, and we can actually be relegated to a test tube right next to smallpox. And I'm just like,
welcome to the Brothers Random Show. My name is Travis.
I'm Michael.
And we are two ordinary brothers discussing extraordinary ideas and some random shit. So the topics on this show range from theology, masculinity, movies, philosophy, books, pop culture, and many other subjects. We often talk about the people we admire and the wisdom that they share, people such as Jordan Peterson, who we believe is the sage of our time. And we welcome back Nathan Dilts. You are popular on our channel, Nathan, so we thought we'd bring you back.
Thanks for coming back.
Wow. Shoot, there we go. Well, I'm honored to be back. I thought we had a terrific couple of discussions last time, so I'm really honored you guys have me back.
How did this get started there, Michael?
Yeah, basically, I mean, you can walk us through it, Nathan, but you saw this video and you can explain it to us, that how it kind of freaked you out a little bit, but you talked to both of us about it. And then
well, first of all, I got to thank you. You know how hard it is. You usually have, 5-6 podcasts that you sort of listen to regularly, and that shelf will rotate. At least that's how it is for me. I've got, at least one or two that I've been consistent on for a year or two. And then there's the slots like 2 through or 3 through 5 or 6, just kind of rotate depending on who catches fancy. But you guys turned me on to a tremendous podcaster named Chris Williamson. He's apparently a Brit, and he has immigrated to the United States. He's living in Houston, and he's actually really interesting to listen to. And you got me turned on to him, and I've been pretty much just listening to episode after episode. I kind of scrolled through. He has probably 300-400 videos up, and I was just kind of cherry picking the titles that stood out to me. And he had one, episode 594, where he interviews a Dr. Wrangham, who's a primatologist. He's at Harvard, but more probably recognizable to everyone is he is the protege for Jane Goodall, and she is the professor, who famously brought the sociology and the primatology of silverback gorillas sort of to the fore. And anyway, she's a really prominent. I remember growing up as a little kid watching nature programs about Jane Goodall and her observation of the lomanellas. Anyway, so I was excited to listen to this interview with her protege, and Dr. Wrangham was talking about the history of violence and the evolution of violence, and a couple of things came out in the video, and it was shocking. It was startling. The first thing he did is outline the notion that religion was born out of the necessity for men to institutionalize the patriarchy, to reinforce institutional patriarchy. And this isn't the first time I've heard a similar type of a thought. And depending on what you guys want to do, we can explore these ideas. There's a couple of different ideas on how religion came about and why it came about, and obviously evolutionary biologists look at it as an adaptive mechanism among creatures that are highly collaborative and socialized, and how that gets leveraged to create hierarchies. Quite honestly, I think your sage of your time, Jordan Peterson, he speaks on this issue extensively, and I love his contribution to the whole discussion. But then he went on and he talked about the idea that men are inherently aggressive, and they, for lack of a to put it in the popular colloquium, they're the toxic masculinity. And and then just kind of bringing it all to a head. And this was the part that absolutely put me through the roof. I was just like out of my seat, like, what is this about? He concluded by saying that as we get really good at genetics, hopefully the time will come when they can start merging ovum directly, or essentially grow the babies in a bottle, and they won't need men, and we can actually be relegated to a test tube right next to smallpox. And I'm just like,
so just to clarify on that, he
Yeah.
said he would. Okay, well, I actually have the quote here, and we were thinking about maybe putting the clip in, but I think it'd be kind of fun just to read through it. So this is what he says. This is Dr. Richard Wrangham, I guess is how it's pronounced.
Wrangham, yeah,
AKA Thanos. But go ahead.
Thanos.
Like the dude wants to take out 50%, but he's got this figured out. He's just getting rid of the Y.
He says, if you think about the species as a whole, this gets it fantastical, but it seems to me that ultimately, if you want to envisage a stable and relatively stable future for the human species, I think it would be a good idea if there are no Y chromosomes. Because the ultimate source of violence is the Y chromosome. Women are clearly less given to what we might call irrational forms of aggression than men are. And I think that it would ultimately behoove us in a world of a new kind of reproductive technology for a moral agreement. I love this. Moral agreement in whatever kind of social structure we have in the world, for the Y chromosome to be put in a test tube like smallpox, and for it not to be manifest.
So that's halfway there, but I bet you that it won't take many decades before we don't need sperm at all.
How would that work? What would you do?
Well, there are birds that are parthenogenetic, that have reproduction without any sperm, and it seems to me that people will increasingly be able to discover what it is about sperm that is necessary for an egg, and it won't be long after that before we figure out a way to have two over fuse.
This is kind of how it starts, right? They dehumanize the individual. So this is very disturbing, and I'm glad you brought this to our attention. This is so before Nazi Germany actually happened, the Nazi Party, they weren't in power yet, but they were about to be. And what they were doing is they were telling everybody that the Jewish population were not human.
Yeah.
They were dehumanizing them. And this guy has the audacity to say that 50% of people can be eradicated. He sees a future where we can be eradicated to get rid of violence in the world. And that is beyond.
In his defense, I don't think he's really suggesting that we like kill all men or anything like that. He's talking about just like eugenics, slowly, basically breeding men out of the population, literally.
Yeah.
Well, if you throw enough video games and sex robots at us,
they'll just do it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, this gets fantastical, but it seems to me that ultimately, if you really want to envisage a relatively stable future for the human species, I think it'd be a very good idea if if there are no Y chromosomes? Because the ultimate source of violence is the Y chromosome.
Yeah, just need the video games and the sex robots, and then we'll go out like docile little male bonobos, and
Yeah.
and just it, and then the X chromosome only half of the human race is left can cross over the River Jordan into the promised land, and achieve the docile, stable utopia that these primatologists can agree to. Yeah, this kind of thinking, I it's not just saying the quiet part out loud. It's saying like the part that's under the top secret label out loud. It you when you think you figured out eugenicists or guys who think or folks that think like this, and then you realize, oh, they were actually 10 steps further into hell with their ideas than you ever could attribute to them. It just blows your mind. And here's the thing that I want to get to. It's like I I I don't want to speculate. I would be curious to see how many scientists look at this as a I'm certainly glad that Chris Williamson had the discussion. I'm glad this thing got said out loud so that it can be thought about and discussed. And I'm curious to, Chris Williamson, he seemed pretty mixed at the end of it. And it was flabbergasting to me that he was even tortured over it. Like, to me, I was just horrified. And I thought exactly like you did, Travis, like, okay, so males are next to rats, and we ought to all be exterminated for the greater good of humanity. And this type of genetic thinking, scientific thinking is where it's what led the Nazis to come to the final solution. And this is like the final solution times 10, and it's horrifying.
Yeah. Well, Chris actually responded, and I wrote down his response too. He just, I think Chris was a little floored. I'll be honest. I think he was just like, whoa, what wait, did you just say that?
Yeah, he didn't respond very quickly.
He said, is that ethical to talk about essentially an entire gender's eugenics removal from the future of civilization?
And the
guy just said, that's the question, isn't it?
That was the only response that guy had. He just said, that's the question, isn't it? Like, what is he? I don't know if he condones like the eradication of an entire gender, like 50% of the population of the world, but it floored me to think that this guy is kind of pushing this. Like, I don't know if he's pushing it.
Well, and let's be honest, as a scientist. So in college, I had a chemistry teacher that actually kind of revolutionized my thinking towards science and religion. And basically, he was basically saying that because I asked him the question, don't remember the context, but basically I was asking the question like, a human is more valuable than a rat. And he was just like, whoa, wait a minute. Why would you say that? And I'm like, well, obviously, like it, and it is obvious, but he's just like, well, science does, a rat does what a rat does really well, and a human does what a human does really well. Science doesn't throw a moral argument upon something. Now, this guy, as a scientist, he is throwing a moral argument, right? So he's not being really scientific, to be honest. He's taking from science, and then he even uses the word that in the future we should have a moral agreement, right? Like that's he's figuring out some kind of moral. This is what we should do.
Well, he's been hijacked by this woke ideology of
woke religion.
Yeah, woke
That's
religion.
A religious statement that he made.
Yeah.
Yes.
He said it's moral to get rid of the cause of all violence in our society. Now, he's not wrong. Men cause almost all of the violence in our society. However, eradicating us does not is not the answer. Channeling aggression is the answer. I mean, Dilts, I don't know
the
about
same aggression that fought wars is the same aggression that built bridges.
Quite honestly, I think the most intelligent thing that was said in the podcast came from Chris Williamson, not
the doctor.
Dr. Wrangham and AKA Thanos, Fem Thanos, or can we call it Femos? I don't know. But anyway, that dude, he was talking about the fact that he got invited to some sort of conference that apparently he's going to, where and the question that he raised is, like, in a society where there's next to no real need for martial skills or aggression, the traditional things that according to their worldview, that we've been evolutionarily and biologically engineered for, but through natural selection, since these things aren't so preeminently front and center for our survival and everything, what is the role for modern man? And that is the real question. And in the past, you had some theorize that, well, that's where sports comes in. It's like you were talking about, Travis, where we channel that aggression. Ancient Rome, they had the gladiatorial games and the arenas, and so there's this whole question of, how do we channel these kinds of aggressions and impulses in a civilized society and a interconnected and highly collaborative society. And I think that's a real fair and a real important question to engage with. And I don't want to redirect it from that. I think we can talk about the idea there, but something I want to point out here is Dr. Wrangham, as you pointed out, started moralizing from a woke religious perspective. And then what's more is, think about the outrageous arrogance, the hubris that went into that statement. Like, the idea, like, there's so many things. I feel, you guys remember Jurassic Park and the mathematician, and he's like, wait, you guys were so busy trying to figure out if you could do this, you never stopped for a moment to think if you should do this. And then what's more, his whole life finds a way. And it's like, the amount of hubris that goes into even saying something like this, like, literally, like, we are a human species according to them for 300,000 years, which I'm fine with. I don't, I can walk down this road with them. So for at least 300,000 years, we've been a sexual binary that has reproduced and created essentially us. And to say that we can chop off half of that, and just because we can breed in a bottle, like how many generations can you breed in a bottle? Like, there's so many unanswered questions on the other side of this postulation and theory that are so staggering. Like, what if something goes horribly wrong and somehow creating the XX super docile, peaceful, happy place? Like, if that goes sideways, you can't pull out of that nosedive once you have, 5 samples of the Y chromosome in test tubes next to smallpox. You don't pull out of that nosedive. You know what I mean? There was a dystopian novel series called Divergent, where they had, like, genetically engineered themselves into highly organized central characteristics and traits, and they realized that it had essentially put them at a cataclysmic evolutionary disadvantage, and they were literally trying to restructure the human genome back out of it. Did you ever read that series?
Yeah, but I've never read the series. I heard about the books, but what this reminded me of Huxley, Brave New World. Did you ever read that?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, essentially, it's a dystopian future of where there's no need for sex, and what it does is it creates species that are divided along those lines, so there's no love and there's no bonding with humans. It's all very sterilized and transactional, and there's no bonding between humans. Life is very, what would you call it, like very unimportant, essentially.
Yeah.
And if this is all theoretical. Like, this guy is not pushing for this. I'm sure he's going to write a book about this eventually, because he said that he was going to. But and
his book was going to be about the patriarchy.
Yeah, about
that's
the
what
patriarchy.
he said.
I think it's mind-boggling to think that this guy. You're right about the hubris thing. He's got a ton of hubris where he's sitting there going, the reason for violence in the world is all due to this one half of the species, and if we can find a way to get rid of that one half, then we would all be better off. And it's so like, think of all the things that we have achieved as a species. Now, I'm not saying that women didn't have any hand in that, and they have a huge hand in that. But are we going to sit here and go, the achievements that we've made, we're going to cut off a half of that in the name of whatever God you want to call it, and then what we're going to do is maybe cause our furthering of the species to falter because of the hubris of cutting that one half out. It's like, what about all the things that we have accomplished? Would we be here now, even be able? So the people who invent this science that he's talking about, they're probably not all going to be men, but there's going to be a portion of them that invent that science, this science that he's talking about, because right now it's just theoretical. So to get to that point, it's just bizarre to me that you would think of even eradicating half of the people that contributed to where we are now, or where we're going to be in the future.
And you're naming the other half of this false dichotomy. Is like, there's this assumption that if we get rid of the aggressive half of the species, that the other half will carry. There's the real question, and the real point I'd make here, an argument, is that both halves in tension with each other is what created the dynamism that led to the growth and evolution that we have, the place where we're at. Our country's founding is just a real quick example. I guarantee you there wouldn't have been a George Washington without a Martha Washington. There wouldn't have been a John Adams without an Abigail Adams. Those women were as critical to the revolution because of the support, the vigor, those guys wouldn't have been able to do what they did without their wives. And it's not just the support role thing. And every person who's ever been in a long-term relationship with a serious lady understands that it's not a support role. It is your right arm and your left arm. It's and that dynamism that comes through both halves of the pair bond is, that's the other part of this. It's not just a false dichotomy. It's an unquantifiable dichotomy that he this postulation. Okay, this question he raises, not only is it completely bogus in the hubris that's on the other side of it, it's compounded by the fact that, so if you had only females or X chromosomes on the other side of this, like, you're assuming that stability and everything would be there. I'm going to make the argument that he said that we're responsible for the irrational aggression. So is the irrational aggression of females going to lead to this utopia that he hopes for on the other side of this? There's so many unknowns in this, where we have 300,000 years of evolutionary biology, according to him, that got us to the moon. But let's wipe out those Ys and see how it goes in the next 300,000 years. That seems like a really risky proposition.
Yeah.
And that's just buying into the story that basically all the bad things that capitalism, all these the patriarchy, it's all due to power and the patriarchy. And throughout the interview, they didn't really talk about any of this stuff. They were talking about other things, but he was dropping in little hints of that it was all male aggression, it was all power, that in eons of time, all societies, women adulterers were punished way more harsher than male adulterers. And that was, and Chris kind of pushed back a little bit. He's just like, well, if we look at all these other things, it seems like there were reasons that that we did these things, and religion didn't necessarily, it wasn't just because of religion. But yeah. So,
well,
I don't know.
Jordan Peterson goes into almost the complete antithesis of what Wrangham actually presents. So Wingham's theory is that it's all based on power. It's all so he gives the same example that Jordan Peterson gives, where they're the tyrannical chimp in a troop will only be tyrannical for a short time, and then he's actually taken out by the pretty much the beta male group that's decided to take him out. Now Wingham's thing is that then the male group chimps start a coalition, in a sense, and rule that way. But Jordan Peterson says the exact same thing, only he says the chimps that are more like
reciprocal,
reciprocal, where they groom the other members of the troop, those are the ones that become the leader, because it's not based on power, it's based on reciprocity. It's based on I do something for you and you do something for me, and that's how we as a species go about our everyday lives. And according to this doctor, who, okay, so he's from Harvard, he's supposed to be super smart, but it seems like he's been taken by this ideology that basically states that everything's based on power. And I don't believe that that's how humans respond to anything, because the first thing that happens when somebody's a jerk to me is I want to figure out a way to get back at them.
And this is all born out of a couple of things. Atheism, and I want to talk about this in a fundamental way, because look, when we talk about religion, like, we have people with specific denominations, doctrines, professions of faith. I certainly have my faith, and I take my faith very seriously. I strive, emphasis on strive, to adhere to it as best I can, and such. But I can speak to the idea of religion. If I met somebody who was deeply uncomfortable with a personal God, I would start probing and exploring the idea of religion as the collective consciousness and wisdom of humanity. And I quite frankly, I think this is a lot of what Jordan Peterson does. If you try to nail Jordan Peterson down to, do you believe in God? Do you believe in Jesus Christ? Do you believe? It gets very uncomfortable. He's because he's very clinically and scientifically minded. He gets very uncomfortable when he can't hinge something into an objectively measurable and observable, fact. But he is fearless about saying, look, humanity has come up with this pool of wisdom that has evolved with it for thousands upon thousands of years. And the wisdom that's pooled in this baseline belief and morality that's grown up with the evolution of humanity shouldn't be so blindly or or dismissed, because there's something there. And I think this video is the perfect example of that. Here you have a man who's an atheist, an evolutionary biologist in the extreme, and who's a scientist. And I'm putting it in quote because for me, this has been a recent phenomenon. When I was a kid, science was a process. It was a discipline and a process that somebody applied to themselves in the focused pursuit of an understanding of a particular thing, biology, physics, whatever it was.
Mhm.
And it was a process. And, when I was growing up, I would say the majority of scientists I met did have faith, and that didn't complicate their work as a scientist, and didn't prevent them from being men of faith. Now you got fellows like Dr. Wangman, or my favorite kindergarten science teacher, good old Billy Nye, who run around and is like, well, you can't believe in God if you're a serious scientist. It's like, wait, this is a process. Turning this into some sort of profession or faith that where you have to be an atheist, you have to believe in evolutionary biologists, and you have to accept these certain tenets, or you aren't a real scientist and you're not a serious scientist. It's like, whoa, when did this become like this its own faith, versus a process that in a disciplined way you try to follow, while you do research in a particular area. And anyway, so not trying to squirrel on this, but going back to the idea of religion, if I can invite somebody to step into the religious sphere from the sense of, let's just accept this as let's accept this as a collective wisdom that humanity has refined, and has a deep sense that and intuits that there's something here. And when you buy into these principles, we're better for it. So you got this guy who's like, well, if Ys are violent and we don't want violent and we want stability, let's whack the Ys. We got the Thanos dude over here. And then you've got what religion teaches, and that is we're made in the image and likeness of God. Therefore, we have intrinsic and eternal worth. And what's more is that as we are made in the image and likeness of God, male and female, he made them. Like that. And it's not, and if you go into Christian faith, like in the New Testament, it says that neither is man without woman, or woman without the man and God, but they need to be together. It goes back to that dynamism, or that tension that causes the two to be greater than the sum of its parts. And I think there's a real wisdom there, whether you want to buy in the particulars of any faith or denomination. Believing those concepts or ideas, I think, does better for everyone than coming to new science and scientists and atheism and evolutionary biology, which leads you to go, let's whack all the males and then we can have utopia. It's like,
and this has happened before, right? It happened before with eugenics. They've done this. Like it was it was accepted science at the time, and that's what they believed. Yeah. So it's very dangerous to basically pull God out of the entire thing, because God makes us have intrinsic value, all of us.
Yep.
Doesn't matter what color we are, doesn't matter what sex we are, we all have value.
Yep.
And once
it includes certain questions too. Like there's no question that back to Michael, your rat and the human, which is better? Well, I can understand a scientist's argument that, well, it depends on the environment. In certain conditions, rats are going to have the advantage because of their physiology. On a sinking ship, it probably is a little better to be a rat for a time.
Yeah.
But at the same time, though, when we talk about consciousness and things like that, and being in the likeness of God, then that should put the brakes on everyone and go, anything where the idea ends with let's wipe out half of humanity, let's go full Thanos on all the males. That's it's like, no, that wouldn't even come out of a single scientist's mouth 70 years ago. even committed eugenicists wouldn't have gone that far. They were like, well, we'll get rid of all the undesirables. But see, even there, and Nazi Germany proved this, Russia proved this, China proves this to this day. How you treat your undesirables tells me more about how close you are to Zion or utopia than how disciplined you are in cleansing humanity of all of its unwanteds.
Yeah.
Do you think with all this, Nathan and Travis, I guess this question to both of you, but do you think with all of this, this is almost like a call, a cry out for a mass return to faith, to religion?
Well, Michael, I remember when we were discussing this a little bit yesterday before we decided to sit down together tonight, I was saying I hope this put the fear of God back into everyone. And I mean that. Like when you got this one dude, if he had the gauntlet, he'd be pushing the green crystal right now.
Yeah.
I hope it puts the fear of God right back into anyone. And I hope this also causes people to soberly reevaluate their positions in terms of like I say, I won't ever push anybody. I certainly, my faith teaches that all men get to worship God according to the dictates of their conscience, and I believe that 100%, even if they're contrary or different to mine. But this idea of no God versus God and its utility, and like I say, this is thing I think Jordan Peter argues for this kind of thinking day in and day out. Whether or not he's really there is beyond us, even from a person of faith. From my point of view, him being there or not isn't dependent on my belief in him. And, and the same thing can be said but is it more useful and is it better for all of us to believe it? And so I hear all the time people say the idea of, well, religion is responsible for all the troubles in the world. The religion, all wars are about religion and everything. And I hope we're going to wake up, because I just this afternoon, I got thinking about this whole thing of which has been worse for humanity's history. So I don't know if you know this, but when we talk about the evils of religion and how many people religion has killed, what's the first atrocity that pops in your mind?
Spanish Inquisition.
Oh, wow. Gee, that's a good one. That was number 2 for me.
Oh, okay.
Well, the atrocities, I would say atrocities makes me think of Nazism, but they weren't religious, right?
If you consider Nazism as a religion, right? But most people, when I talk to them, they bring up the Crusades. So Spanish Inquisition, Crusades, right? Like those two are the epitome of like, ooh, yeah, when evil goes sideways and gets in the business of eliminating other human beings on behalf of God, like, oh, that's, it's like Crusades, it's the Spanish Inquisition, Mountain Meadow Massacre, like you can go down the list.
You can
the Irish Protestants and Catholics fighting each other, the Bosnians and everybody can start dropping all of these conflicts that are religiously centered. The Muslims in the Philippines and Africa versus,
Well, I think when they do that, they're giving a superficial idea, because if you do any really heavy research, it wasn't only about religion. Like if you do any heavy research into any of those it was like political, there was financial incentives. It wasn't all religion. Like people love to throw that in there, but the Crusades made people rich. Like they claimed it was for God, and that it may have been historians put it down like that, but the people who went into the Crusades, and the Crusades were it was a couple hundred years long or something like that. I don't even remember.
He's kind of getting to that. To let him finish his point.
Yeah.
Oh, well, the only thing I was going to say real quickly, there are actually 9 Crusades, and there's a bunch of what you're saying that's correct. But here's the funny thing. Just this afternoon, I went and looked up. They estimate that 3 to 9 million people were killed in the course of the Crusades through warfare. So 3 to 9 million. Now the Spanish Inquisition, let's be generous and give it another million. And I'm being generous because it wasn't quite a
I think
million.
the death toll was in the thousand. It was only like 2,000-3,000 or something like that. It actually
So we're
was.
gonna round up to a near million. So we're at 10, right? We'll take a couple thousand and round it up to a million, just to be really generous to the folks that really hate on the believing in God camp. And then you go and you start adding all these other. We can add maybe 1 or 2 more million through, all of these other conflicts you could rouse up. Now, going back to you, Travis, how many Jews were killed by the Nazis?
8 million.
At
6
least
million.
8 million.
6 million, 8 million through the war.
Just under 11 million. If you count now, your figures based on the concentration camps.
Yeah.
But if you think about the ones they liquefied in country and in ghettos outside of concentration, it's just under 11 million. And we actually have a really precise number on that because the Germans were amazing clerks. They were amazing record keepers. Now, so you have 11 million. So you have all 9 crusades and you have the Spanish Inquisition, and you add in another million or two just for the wars we are going to give some generous link to. Hitler alone killed the equivalent of what all the big major conflicts people fall in my face about how religion is responsible for all this death and misery in the world. Now we go to Stalin. You know how many people Stalin killed? Yeah, Stalin was responsible for 20 to 60 million Russian deaths. And so the game becomes, well, do you only count the people that were killed in like gulags and work camps and were, drugged into buildings and shot in the middle of the night? Or do you also count the ones that his like 5-year programs killed through famine because of, the absolute, they basically tried to compel all the farmers to farm, and then they took all of the fruits into the cities, and then they let all the rural areas starve to death. Well, if you count all those, then we're getting to 60 million. If you only
And
want
then
to
Mao killed even more than that.
What?
Mao didn't
Yeah.
Mao? He tops the list.
And by the way, if you want to have fun, and you want to see how corrupt your internet is, go type in the question. Like it took me like 5 minutes scanning between about 5-10 pages to get a real clear idea on Hitler and Stalin. It took me 30 minutes to try to get what I thought was enough consenting sources. Yeah, it's so funny how much
hide that one
have over the internet. Go afterwards and Google and ask how many did Mao kill. You got pages on there like, oh, he couldn't have killed that many. It was only 1.6 million. It's like, what? No. But I got to a couple of different what I felt were reliable pages. The estimate on Mao is 48 to 78 million. 1 out of every 28 Chinese person was killed under Mao's regime.
It was his own people. Yeah. It wasn't like he invaded them.
Right. These were his own people. And all of these communists, these are atheistic, utopian-driven societies. Yeah. These are all the green gem punching Thanoses. And this is we're really confronting this. And Nietzsche famously predicted this. He predicted that in the 20th century, because God would be dead, there would be untold misery and death in humanity. And so, yeah, I really hope this puts the fact that you have an American scientist who's Jane Goodall protege, who's a Harvard professor, who says on a popular platform like Chris Williamson, yeah, let's put Y chromosomes in the tube next to smallpox. I hope is a wake-up call and puts that fear of God back into every human.
How do we fix it?
There's a certain amount of self-loathing that I think has to come. Like he has to be self-loathing of some kind, because I don't know where he's a man. So like, does he just think that all I don't know where you go with that. Like,
White Knight.
yeah, it's like, is he just trying to get like the clapter? Like, oh, you're so righteous because you thought of this idea that you should get rid of the Y chromosome through society. It's like, wow.
He's
I don't
the
know.
And a
he's
cushiony
the
life.
scientific self-sacrificing simp. It's amazing. Yeah.
A
Like
cushiony life. Listen, he's sitting in a house built by men on concrete poured by men, driving on roads built by men, that, you know, in a car that's built machines and women and men. But like the hubris to just sit there and be like, yeah, all the violence of men. Like, who's he going to call if a burglar breaks into his house? I mean, there's some female police officers, but guaranteed if it got to knockout, drag out, brawl to get this burglar out of his house, he's going to want a man.
Well, you know, here's the funny thing, but if we're all gone or we're all busy with our video games and our sex robots, that won't be an issue.
Yeah,
It's
well,
like,
yeah, because they
they'll
won't. The
give us
burglar.
UBI, sex robots, and video games, and then we'll gladly go into that dark night, and we will whimper in our sleep as we go gently into that dark night.
I don't know. Michael, you were saying something.
Well, it's I've showed you guys this picture of a plumber, some kind of plumber. He's got his hands down in the street, and he's like working on something. And these girls are walking by, and they're looking down at him, and he's looking up at them. And it was a meme. Somebody made it, and they said, "Stop oppressing me." And he's like, "Oh, sorry." It's just,
well, so to your question about how do we fix this, I hope that Chris Williamson, when he goes to whatever this conference is, and they have this discussion about what is the role of men in this modern world, I hope that is a real serious dialogue where they come to something, and I'm running through my head right now saying, okay, if I got to be Dr. Wangman for a day and decide what the future will hold, and obviously I'm going to dismantle the gauntlet, hide the green gem, give that back to Doctor Strange, and make sure he runs away with it. You know,
well,
how
what
do
if
we fix
let's just
it?
if Nathan Dilts was king of the world, let's just play a thought experiment here. Nathan Dilts is king of the world, and can implement things that would help all of this.
Okay, well, all right. Well, first of all, let me say that we should like have some real serious sit down and creative thought experiments on this question, because frankly, I'm concerned that if we don't seriously address this, and if they don't get the sex robots out to us fast enough, and the UBI and the video games out to us fast enough, that there's a real chance that the Y chromosomes will break the system in order to make themselves valid and needed again. Like realistically, I think we face that possibility, because I know if somebody decides that I just need to go extinct, I'm going to seriously consider the idea of well, if we just go back to and break the system so that we become useful again. And
they need
you
us
thought
again.
that
Yeah.
Jack Donovan's book, Where Every Man Harbors. That's why we like all those dystopian novels and the World War Z and the Walking Dead movies and books and films, because it's like now we're valid again, and there's a purpose for what and who we are. You know, that stuff gets, you know, we love those John Wick movies, and because then we're like important and valuable again, instead of, you know, failures in cubicles and offices that like have nothing to live for and aren't respected in society at all. So my first thought would be is we enjoy the prosperity that essentially is supposedly making us obsolete, is pushing us down the hill of obsolescence in America and primarily in Europe. But there is a majority of the world that isn't enjoying the same blessings that we have. If you did nothing else but let the men loose in those parts of the world, so we could start putting the hurt to the oppressors and start nation building and civilization building. But see, here's the thing. Now that's colonialization. That's, evil oppression too. It's like, so if you unleash us so we can go kick ass in Asia and, tell the Chinese to stop massacring the Uyghurs and then try to build that country into something more than a third world, despot coffer, then we're evil for doing it. And it's like, so, my first inhibition is, well, let's go full Atlas shrugged and unleash all those who want to be, builders and nation makers. Let's unleash them and say, come follow me and go do it. But like I say, now they won't let you do it because we got to let people wallow in oppression and poverty and everything. And, or else we're oppressing them if we try to bring anything more than that. But my first impulse would be to say, let's go remake the world. We got an overwhelming amount of this world that still needs running water, needs basic sanitation.
Yeah.
And if we could be let loose, we could turn that around.
Yeah.
Look at what he did with Elon Musk did with a tweet in getting wells in Africa. Do you remember that?
I didn't see that.
Tweeted like, hey, we just need this many million and we can build wells for every town in this country in Africa. And Elon's like, done. it's like, And so that's my first impulse. But my second one is for people to put things back in a religious term, is to repent, to realize that men and women as a bonded unit are greater than the sum of their parts, and not forget that the thing that got us here, that took, even according to the scientists, that took 300,000 years to come to. Don't throw that away. And literally, Darwin did Origin of Species in what year? Like
1890?
90,
yeah.
I think.
So in the span of 100 and, whatever, in just a couple hundred years, we're going to, based on that idea, we're going to get rid of half the population. I think that we need to step back from that and realize how reckless that is to even go there at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. Final thoughts on that, Michael?
When I listening to this and thinking about it, I thought it would be kind of fun to do like a story formed in my mind of a dystopian future where it's all women and they have a way that they don't really mate, but they put their what do they call them?
Ovums,
Put their eggs together and make another human, and this has just been going on forever. And have like a Norse 6'4" built like a horse dude, like somehow land there, like some kind of weird thing that time lapse or something like that. And he's just like, what the hell is this? And all these women are just like, what is this specimen from the gods?
Oh, dude, he'd be a hit. You know what? That would be literally Thor walking onto the island of the Valkyries from Wonder Woman. That's what it is. Like if you throw Chris Hemsworth into the island but see, that's the funny thing. That's what Dr. Wrangham thinks would be the future. He literally thinks it would be that Valkyrie Island or whatever the name of that island was.
Themyscira.
Yeah, he literally, that's his vision. It's like if we got rid of all the males, it'd just be Themyscira. And quite frankly, don't throw Chris Hemsworth on that island. Throw me, man. I'd go. You know what? Maybe Dr. Wrangman's right. You know what? We had it all wrong. So, Gal Gadot, here I come.
Yeah.
They're gonna have to take what do you call it, a lottery for each dude that gets to go on the island.
It's like that. It's like a holy grail. Spank me, spank. Oh no, I can handle this. No,
Monty Python. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think we solved anything, but neither has Dr. Wrangham, because I think that guy's gonna get shut down if he tries pushing this idea any further, because
I hope so, but I have a feeling that I think it is going to be his next book, man. I mean, look at what. Yeah, I hope you're right. I want you to be right, Travis.
well, the internet is the place to be right now, because that's where counter ideas are happening. So, and I mean, this is a fairly old interview with Chris Williamson. So, I mean, it's at least a month old, and I didn't hear anything about it online. And I have to cherry pick his podcast, because I can't listen to everything he does. He's got he puts out so much, and I don't blame Chris Williamson, because he's just the interviewer. But he did push back, I think, as much as he was comfortable with doing. Right. But that guy needs a lot more pushback if that's what he's pushing. I mean, his answer.
And I'm glad it's coming through this format, because what I don't want is, I don't want him shut down. But I'm glad that people like you and Michael are having these conversations and saying, "Hey, wait a minute, we don't agree, and here's our points that say this is a really bad idea."
Yeah.
And the problem for the solution for what do they call it, this hate speech. The solution for hate speech is more truth speech. It's not shutting down hate speech. Like when you resist something, it either flourishes underground in darkness, or it openly resists.
Yeah.
But like in America, you had chattel slavery, you had Jim Crow, then you had KKK, and then in my lifetime and my parents' lifetime, they dwindled to next to nothing, because society finally realized that this is just stupid, and it basically got shown how obsolescent and how what a terrible idea it was by people coming to know Black people in their neighborhoods, neighbors, friends, families, seeing them, in society and things. And it's like, oh, wait, and so when those guys marched down the streets in their little bed sheets, everybody just rolled their eyes and like, you guys are idiots, grow up. And that's what killed it. The solution to hate speech is truth speech. It's not suppressing any speech.
Yeah. Mic drop. All right. Well, we have some housekeeping to do real quick before we end this. I just want to say to our audience that we are trying to get consistent in our drops for our videos. We usually make these about 2 to 3 weeks in advance, and then we try to put them out every episode out every week on Thursdays. That's when we're going to start dropping them. We do have bonus episodes that will come out midweek, sometime midweek, but usually bonus episodes are shorter. Usually they involve some hot topic going on. Also, Michael is making a ton of I want to put out the people who are only listening on podcast, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Those people, I would strongly suggest going to our YouTube channel, because we actually have Michael puts out a lot of shorts. He does a really good job with making the shorts. And I've got a couple of video essays, and I'm going to try to put those out as regularly as I can. I think that's it. Michael, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that's it. Yeah.
You want to give the socials?
Oh yeah. I don't know if anybody sees our email, but if anybody wanted to email us, they could email us at brothersrandomv@gmail, but Twitter at brothersvrandom. We're on Rumble at the Brothers Random, Instagram at the Brothers Random.
And Nathan, before we let you go, I'm going to do a quick round, lightning round for you. We
Sure.
didn't do it last time you were here. Recommend a movie.
Movie, any category or just my
Whatever.
favorite movie ever? My favorite movie ever is a movie called The Emperor's Club.
Emperor's Club. Ooh.
Yep. If you haven't seen it, go watch The Emperor's Club.
What year is it?
Long ago, not. I don't feel like that. I got it. I'm gonna say it's in the 90s sometime.
90s. Okay.
It's funny
right.
to me because I've hit that point where it's like I'll pull. Oh, this is a great movie. My kids are like, Dad, that's so old. It's like from the 90s. It's so
from the 90s.
old. And it's like, no, that's not that old. And then it's like, oh crap, it's 2023. Yeah, that's like 30 years old. I'm like, wow. Anyway, but yeah, Emperor's Club.
What book would you recommend?
Do you have a category genre? Like what kind of, like I can give you a top 5 books.
What's the most recent?
Fiction, science fiction, like
what's the most recent that you read?
Most recent book that I read that was a real game changer for me. Shoot. You know what book I'm going to no, I know what book I'm going to recommend. I'm going to recommend you guys read a book called On Killing by Lieutenant Colonel David Grossman. It is without doubt one of the top 5 influential books of my life outside of the scriptures.
Okay. Thank you for that.
The title sounds scary, but dive into it. It'll hopefully transform you. But yeah, On Killing by David Grossman.
Nathan, I really appreciate you coming on to this. This is a topic that I'm sure we're probably not going to see the last of. So be watching. We'll do like a number 2. If you find another video, if this jack wagon comes out again and says this kind of BS, pushes the Thanos button, the gauntlet. Yeah. So thank you, sir. Thank you for coming on. And
my honor. Yeah.
And is there anything that you'd like to plug, like online, anything?
No, you guys are what I plug. Brothers Random, man. I'm glad you're having the fun discussions and the serious discussions. I think this kind of mix and this format is really powerful because I like reading a lot of fiction and I put it in between my nonfiction. You got to have that mix. So I think that's what makes your podcast unique is you do books, you do movies, and then you talk about some of the heavy social issues. And I think that's a nice mix. So everyone gets to build that elasticity in their gray matter.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that. All right. Keep reading, keep listening, keep watching, learn more. Thank you, guys. Have a good one. Bye.
See ya.